My name's Clay. I'm an alcoholic. My home group is the Brainerd Group, and my sobriety date is June the 2nd, 2008. I hesitated a little bit. I met a guy I went to treatment with, and I think I might have been in there in July. I'm not sure. It was pretty bad. I was asked to introduce Steve tonight. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was just telling him that it saved my life, and that's how I feel about it. And they asked me to do this, and I don't particularly care to get up here in front of people, but when I'm asked to do something, I do that. And the one thing I love about this is, I was asked to do it, so I listened to a couple of his speaker tapes on YouTube, and I really liked what he shared. And that's been the kind of the thing about my life in AA is I've met some people in AA, and I look forward to getting to know you better. So if you want to come up here, and I think I really need to listen on this.
Thank you, Clay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Lee. I'm an alcoholic. Man, what a treat to be here. How much fun it's been to hang out with you guys over the course of the weekend, and I look forward to the balance of today and tonight. Cliff and Vivian and John and Leslie have been great. Vivian, I heard your first talk last night, and I wasn't here for 8 and 9, but I'm just going to take it for granted you cleaned that mess up during 8 and 9. Because I heard about the carnage, and I assume you went and cleaned up after yourself on 8 and 9. And, if you've looked at your schedules and paid attention to the different sessions, you've noticed that all of those 4 speakers that I mentioned are sharing twice, and I'm just sharing once. That doesn't bother me. And in fact, you've also seen that they were all speaking on a step or steps, and which makes great sense. Here in the 12-step program, we're going to touch all 12 of them. And that if you saw on your schedule that I will be speaking on relationships. And, if you will lean to the west, you will hear my wife laughing at home at the idea that I'm speaking to you on relationships. Now let me be clear, this will be a comfort to some of you and a disappointment to others, that when Chrissy called and asked me to do this workshop and speak on relationships, it is because I believe that she had, a few years ago during COVID, I had given a talk with this title. But I think it was about a 15 or 20 minute lead. And it came out of, and I've only given that talk once, and I don't remember it, so I won't be giving that talk today. So we don't know yet what talk I'm giving today. I brought some notes up in case I go dry. I'll just read aloud to you. But the fact is, I was in a meeting a few years ago, and not surprisingly, a guy came in a little bit late to the meeting. I've been that guy. But it was already in progress, and someone was sharing, and the guy came in and sat down, and as soon as that person that was sharing was done, not surprisingly, the guy that just came in decided to share. And he said, I don't know what the topic is. That's also not surprising. We don't let the topic limit us to what we might share. None of our speakers this weekend have been held hostage to the topic. But he said, He said, I don't know what the topic is, but from what I've heard, I assume it's relationships. And it wasn't. But all of that is to say that as I sat there, what struck me was that actually it was. And actually all of our meetings are about relationships. And so the relationships that I'll be talking about today, while we will touch on coupleship and a romantic relationship, that's not really the focus. You know, there are multiple relationships. And it started in my relationship with alcohol, which Vivian talked about last night in that first step. One of the first things you guys encouraged me to do when I got to AA against my will, when I was remanded both to treatment and ended up in AA meetings to satisfy a legal situation. But you guys didn't tell me I was alcoholic. You encouraged me to examine my relationship with alcohol, both through the language in our big book and listening to you share your stories about your alcoholism, and see, as multiple speakers have talked about, whether that identification was there. I just spent 30, 40 minutes on a phone call upstairs with a man I've never met, that another guy asked me could we talk, and this guy, you know, I just love these. This guy's never been to treatment. He's never been to an AA meeting. He is unsure whether he's alcoholic or not. In fact, he doesn't think he is. And I certainly don't know. So I'm not a guy that's looking for converts, right? I'm not out trying to convince somebody they're alcoholic. But we talked, and I said, we can explore that relationship with alcohol. His wife had asked for, and she has moved out and asked for what he referred to as a therapeutic separation, which sounds a lot like a regular separation. Sounds like one of them's moving out. But anyway, and you know, we will laugh here today, but I understand what that guy, what he's going through, right? That's painful, and he's being challenged, and she's uncomfortable with his drinking. And they got kids, and so the kids are going, and he said, and you know, it was just so synchronistic that conversation happened just before coming down here, because he said, look, he's a successful, materially successful guy. He works hard, right? I'm hearing from him. He says, I don't know why I can't come home and have 2 or 3 beers. And he said, and I do smoke weed nightly. And I said, well, I'm not in charge of whether you should be able to do that or not. But I said, but it sounds like there's an alcohol problem in the home. And he said, well, I don't think I'm drinking too much. I said, that doesn't mean there's not an alcohol. Your wife has asked you to move out. That's a problem. And I don't know whether you're drinking too much or not, but if your wife thinks you are, and your marriage and your relationship with your kids is at risk, and you're still trying to defend your right to take a drink, then maybe you want to examine just how important that relationship is. Because my history tells me that people who say they can take it or leave it always take it. You guys had me or encouraged me to examine my relationship with alcohol. The first time I sat in a meeting where people were going around, this was in a treatment environment, not an AA environment. I didn't know the difference. All I knew is that there were some people in a circle, and each person was asked to introduce him or herself, and each person, after they gave their name, was saying that they were alcoholic. I'm Bob, I'm an alcoholic. I'm Jim, I'm an alcoholic. I'm Sally, I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I couldn't have been more impressed with Sally. It sounded like a promotion from regular alcoholic. And going around, but I'm sweating bullets because it's coming around. And I'm not ready to say I'm an alcoholic. I don't think I'm an alcoholic. I'm unwilling to be alcoholic. I know if I say out loud I'm an alcoholic, somebody's going to suggest I not drink anything at all. And that's an overcorrection to the problem I showed up with. So it comes around, and I said, I'm Steve, I'm a problem drinker. And they said that was perfectly okay. And I'm grateful that you gave me the room to be here. No better place to figure out if I'm alcoholic than hanging around with you guys for a little while. So that guy I was on the phone with, I said, if you're curious, we can go to a couple of meetings together, and you don't have to do anything. You know, I got to be honest. I tell somebody that's never been to an AA meeting when we're going in together, I said, look, early in the meeting, somebody's going to ask, is there anybody here for their first meeting? I said, now you can say yes, or you can say nothing. I said, now if you say yes, they're going to talk at you the rest of the hour. Because we have a tendency to do that. And that'd make me uncomfortable. Now some people thrive for the attention. I don't know what's good, bad, right, or wrong. I just know there's different flavors, right? And I said, so they're going to talk to you. And I said, then toward the end of the meeting, they're going to be handing out these chips. And somebody's going to say they're going to hand out what they call a desire chip, and everybody in that room is going to start staring at you to see if you're going to come pick it up. I said, I don't care. What I want you to do is come in here, sit down, relax. Nothing is required. Pay attention, see if anything fits. So I examined that relationship with alcohol, and I finally got to the point in that examination based on my own experience that what page 43 in our book says, or 44, and what Vivian talked about last night, was I got introduced to the idea of the allergy, which I had never heard before. And as the doctor's opinion says, that allergy explains that. We found it interesting. For it explains that for which I could not otherwise account. Oh. I mean, I had no idea that my body processed alcohol differently than the non-alcoholic. That it put in place what Silkworth called that phenomenon of craving. How cool is that language, right? I mean, were you ever out at the bar and after your second or third drink go, I don't know about you, pal, but that phenomenon of craving's kicking in on me. Whoa, lack of power is my dilemma. No, I didn't have a language to talk. I didn't understand my relationship to alcohol. I didn't understand why, and as I think, I don't remember which of our speakers mentioned it, but I was not going to let that happen again, right? And that was me. I spent a lot of time not trying to stop drinking, but trying to not drink too much. And too much didn't mean don't get drunk. It meant don't get too drunk. I got 6 DUIs. I didn't get any of them on purpose. The first 2 could happen to anybody. I mean, I thought that. I wasn't puzzled by that. But DUIs 3 through 6, I tried really hard not to get. I had strategies. I had a plan. I had stuff I wasn't going to do, stuff I was going to do, and I didn't know why I couldn't do it or not do it. Back in To the Employer, notice we're not such a fanatical group of alcoholics that we decided to have somebody do To the Employer this weekend. You got to be really committed to read all the way back to the Employer. Yeah, those pages aren't dog-eared in your book. I know that. But back there it says when dealing with an alcoholic, there must be a natural annoyance that someone could be so weak, stupid, and irresponsible. Because to the untrained eye, alcoholism looks weak, stupid, and irresponsible. It looks like if you cared enough about our marriage, you wouldn't do that. It looks like if you loved your daughter, you wouldn't do that. It looks like if you cared about that job, you wouldn't do that. It looks like if you wanted to stay out of jail, you wouldn't do that. It looks like firm resolve and good intentions would be sufficient. And since I don't know anything about alcoholism, I don't understand that. I think I'm weak, stupid, and irresponsible. And let me be clear, those can be co-occurring disorders. You can be alcoholic and weak, stupid, and irresponsible, but I didn't understand any of that, so I'm finally look at that relationship with alcohol. And I see that I've got the physical allergy, I've got the mental obsession. So, and all of this that I'm sharing today is from my perspective, right? My point of view. Who was it? Cliff, I think, talking about that. I think you talked about a denomination of bills I don't have. It was a higher denomination than I have, Cliff. But, you know, we're in this hotel. Somebody looks out their window and sees the parking lot, and somebody looks out their window and sees the skyline, right? It's a point of view. Where am I looking from? So what I'm sharing from up here is I'm just telling you this is what it looks like from here. This was my experience. This is what it feels like. So after I came to some level of understanding of this relationship with alcohol, I unknowingly am beginning to take a look at my relationship with me. The unmanageability of my life, I view as the spiritual malady. So now, and the thing is, probably the most dysfunctional relationship in my life is my relationship with me. And I don't quite get it. I discovered, I think it's been said a couple of different ways. In fact, there's not a theme that I will share from the podium today that hasn't already been addressed at some level. And in fact, we could take the talks that have been given this weekend and for the most part, put them in a sack and pull them out and put whatever number next to the talk we wanted to. Because ultimately this isn't a linear program, it's a spiritual program. And the steps are in order to be worked in order, I get it, but ultimately it is a hodgepodge, this spiritual. As was read by, I think, Vivian last night, these steps are spiritual in nature. So this isn't linear, it's not academic, it's not intellectual, it's experiential. And then we try to find language to talk about an experience that defies description. So sometimes it sounds different coming from you than coming from you. But it doesn't have to be. So that relationship with me. And then there's going to be a relationship with God. Early in the book, it says what we do in our personal stories. Each of us in our own language and from our own point of view talks about how he established a relationship with God. And in fact, I'm going to do something here. You know, sometimes you read a book or watch a movie and it starts by showing you the very last scene. And then then it says 3 weeks earlier, right? And the very last scene on page 164 in our book says, see to it that your relationship with him is right, and great things will come to pass for you and countless others. So the end game is for me to find a way to relate myself rightly to him. Each of these steps is an exercise in ego deflation, to remove those things that block me off from the sunlight of the Spirit and get me in relationship to this higher power. There's my relationship with you, the world at large, and my fellows. There's my relationship in my family with my wife. There's a relationship with my daughter. There's my relationship with money, with work, or as John would say, not working. So how am I? Everything about this is about relationship. Because as Chamberlain said, and we talk about so often, that the singular problem from which all my problems hang is that conscious separation from man and God. I am out of relationship with God and out of relationship with you. Now, what I don't know when I get to AA, as I was talking with this gentleman earlier, it was saying, I'm going to put these away because I'm not going to say anything I meant to. I'll pull them out later if I need to read it. I'm talking to the guy, and I said, but you know what really puzzled me? I said, because when I got, he was 36, I was 35 when I got sober. My sobriety date's June 30th of 89. I said, what really puzzled me was not what happened to me when I was drinking. I mean, I got drunk and stuff happened. But I can explain anything that ever happened to me when I was drinking. I was drunk. When I'm drunk, I do drunk stuff. You know, you pour a fifth of whiskey in me and a fifth of whiskey in a non-alcoholic, we're both going to be drunk and we're both going to do drunk stuff. But what puzzled me was why, with a wife that loved me and a kid that loved me and a middle-class life and 2 cars in the driveway and a mortgage that was up to date, why do I feel the way that I feel? And if you asked me how I felt, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I just know I feel different than I think you feel. That's that separation, that conscious separation. In A Vision for You, it describes Dr. Bob in one place, and it talks about him. It says that he was painfully aware of feeling somehow abnormal, for he did not yet fully understand what it meant to be alcoholic. And see, I knew what it was like to be painfully aware of feeling somehow abnormal. Now, my drinking was abnormal. I'm not sure those feelings are that abnormal. What I've discovered is that's pretty much the human condition. It's exacerbated in a guy like me, and I treat it with alcohol and or other drugs because I'm too uncomfortable to feel this way. And I don't know the feeling. I don't know till after I get here that you guys are telling me that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble. That doesn't mean that I'm selfish like I got $10 and won't loan you $5. That's that selfishness. It's this hyper self-consciousness, this hyper awareness of me, which would have me, I know what it's like to be getting ready sober, to walk into a family situation or a work situation or a social situation and have to steel myself up before walking through the door to get myself ready to then pop through that door and act like a guy would act if he were comfortable, if he were at ease, if he were confident, if he were gregarious. To act like that. And what happens when our book says that we have an inability to form a true partnership with another human being, in many ways that's because I never brought truly who I was to our relationship. Whatever relationship we had, I was putting a facade in front of it. And this isn't strategic. Sometimes it sounds like that somebody like me knew what was going on while I was doing it. I didn't. Life was happening to me, but I knew that I was uncomfortable. Somewhere in the big book, it talks about alcohol as a social lubricant. Man, I get that. I needed to be socially lubricated. I needed to be oiled up so I could move easily amongst you. And without that, I was uncomfortable. I was self-conscious. But here's the thing, I don't think you knew it, because I was acting. And acting was exhausting. and it's lonely. Bill says the alcoholic knows loneliness as few do. And that loneliness is not when I'm drinking. That loneliness was sober. My relationship to the world, I feel cut off. Chamberlain had that picture, the big circle, with a little dot outside of it, this being the world and all the world's people, and that little dot on the outside is me. Now again, I don't understand all this intellectually while I'm going through it. It is how I view it looking back at it, but I can see it clearly. You know, our book says we alcoholics are sensitive people. I was sober several years before I realized that's not a compliment. I should have known it because the next line refers to it as a devastating handicap. That sensitivity. I'm so easily thrown off. I'm easily hurt. I'm so self-conscious that it cuts me off from a real relationship, an intimate relationship. One of the things I'm most grateful for, I think Cliff and I were talking about it this morning a little bit, that we get together with each other. I'm bad at small talk. I used to have nothing but small talk. We're talking about the most important personal things in our lives with each other. I never did that. And that wasn't the fault of the people I was in relationship with. It was my inability to have the relationship. And I have so many intimate relationships today.
5 p.m.
It's 5 o'clock if you wondered. Yeah. Yeah. At 5:30 she says, "Shut up, stupid." But my sponsor said, some of you have heard me tell some of these stories. It's the only ones I got unless I start making up some new ones. But I had shared in a meeting. I was 4 or 5 years sober and living in Richmond, Virginia, and I shared in a meeting. I talked about as long as I've talked here, and it was not a speaker meeting. And I got home, and my sponsor had been in the meeting with me, and I was feeling embarrassed now that I had done this, and I called him. And I said, "Joe, did I sound self-righteous in that meeting?" And he said, "Oh, Steve," he said, "you're still asking the wrong questions. Because the question isn't, did you sound self-righteous? The question is, were you self-righteous?" He said, "But you don't care whether you were self-righteous or not. You're afraid they think you're self-righteous." And wasn't he right? And he said, "Here's the news." He said, "Steve, you're not who you think you are. And you're not who they think you are. And you are especially not who you think they think you are." Now, I will tell you, when you said it, it's like a bomb went off. Because I realized I have lived most of my life, and can on any given day today, but live most of my life based on what I think you think. How will this look? How will this sound? What will they think? How will it play? So not being me, but trying to be the version of me that I think will get your approval. I was leaving my house one night to go to a meeting. My daughter, this again was 20 years ago or so, and my daughter's in there. She said, "Dad, you going to wear that shirt?" I went, "Not now." No, you've really come pick something out for me. Something you think they'll like. Because the shirt I liked, the version of me that I was going to take out, I'm now unsure and uncomfortable with. Now, we often hear people say, and I take I don't argue with it, that what other people think of me is none of my business. And I understand what that means, but to me that doesn't mean I don't care what you think. I absolutely care what you think. what you guys have taught me in Alcoholics Anonymous is not to take actions based on what I think you'll think. That you have taught me to embrace this design for living, these 12 principles, and to take actions based on principle, not on what I think you'll think. Now, that doesn't mean we're not kind and considerate and compassionate. It just means that I want to bring we begin to use language sometimes, certainly I do, use words so often that they lose their impact. And the one of the last few years, both sometimes in AA and out in my workplace, is bringing my authentic self to something, right? I want to bring my authentic self. And I think that's a really good thing, but I've just cheapened it by the way that I've used it, you know. But man, what about finding who I really am? We say to thine own self be true. Boy, that's a hard one for me to figure out sometimes. How do I be true to myself? We'll talk about some of these things may weave in and out, but I'm going to talk for a minute, too, about my relationship with my wife. Now, Connie and I have been married 42 years, and there's some, stop. Well, because the point I want, and by the way, because I told somebody the other day, I've been sober 36 years. But my sponsor, Frank, told me when I was picking up my 3-year medallion, and I was pretty full of myself, because somebody told me I could then start using the phrase, I'd been around a few 24 hours. And I said, that's the timeline for that, Steve. And but Frank said, look, Steve, all this does is measure. It's the only thing that is quantifiable. It's a measurement of from when you had your last drink till today, but it does not measure your spiritual condition. And Connie and I have been married 42 years, but some people can be married. Our book, the 12 and 12 says it's not whether to stay married, but how can I be happily married? Because I can do time, right? We can stay together. And I would say that during that 42 years, we've ebbed and flowed. So some of you know Connie, many of you have heard me tell the story of how we met, but we met in a bar. Connie had just moved back to Nashville from Lake Tahoe, where she had been dealing baccarat in a casino for two years. She had gotten married there, and she had gotten divorced, and she had just come back fresh off that divorce with a divorce pickup truck and a divorce pocket full of money and a divorce 8-ball of cocaine, and I just fell for that package. And yeah, you put that on your Tinder profile today, you'll get some action. But we started running and gunning a little bit together, and a few months later, we went on a trip to Mexico and drank something out of a coconut and ended up on a boat that went out to what they swear were international waters. And an Austrian merchant marine read in Spanish what he swears was a wedding ceremony. Now, I say, we don't speak Spanish, so we don't know what we agreed to on that boat. But and it was 7 years later before I ended up getting sober, and again, not through virtue or intelligence, but that 6 DUI I had got me some jail time, and they were going to cut some of that jail time off if I would go to a drug and alcohol rehabilitation. And I did that, and Connie wasn't trying to get me to stop drinking. She wanted me to drink differently, trust me. She wanted me to not drink with them and not drink it there and come home and you know, respect our marriage and be a father, but I was pretty poor at all of those things. But many of you know Connie's sobriety date now is 10 days after mine, so she is likewise, we've been sober all that time. But after 7 years of marriage, and we loved each other as much as we were capable. But I think my capacity was limited. And so we struggled after getting sober. We had to figure out who the new people in the house are. We had to find a new basis for our relationship. Our book says about us getting sober, right? It says we come to AA at the level of the problem, like those passengers in the shipwreck. But that wouldn't keep us together, right? I'd say the majority of people are here today at the level of the solution. I'm here today, I'm personally here today, not out of fear of getting drunk. Don't misunderstand me. I know I'm capable of drinking again. I'm not cocky about that. I don't take it for granted. But rather than running from fear of the life I used to have, I'm drawn to the life I have and where I'm going. I'm not here out of desperation. I'm here out of gratitude and inspiration. We had to find that in our relationship, and it took a while. At 10 years sober, we went bankrupt. We lost our home. We lost our cars. I often say they came and loaded our cars up on a flatbed truck, and they call it surrendering them in a bankruptcy, and they were driving them off, and I called my sponsor, Frank, and I said, Frank, man, they took our cars. And he said, no, Steve. He said, actually, they took their cars. They took the cars you quit paying for. But we had 2 years, it takes a while to go broke. And I spent a lot of time trying to not let it happen and robbing from Peter to pay Paul and taking calls from creditors and Connie and I arguing with each other. The pressure ratchets up. She was mad at me. I was mad at her for being mad at me. And ultimately we had one of those fights you can't pretend you didn't have. We said things we couldn't pretend we didn't say. We just couldn't get up the next day and go on about our business. And what happened for me, and Connie has a different version of the story, but what happened for me in that was I got in that relationship in a way that I didn't know I wasn't in it. Because we were either going to separate or we were going to come together in partnership. And what happened, gratefully for me, is we came together in partnership. And what happened was with this woman that I'd been married to for 11 years, we finally began to have an intimate relationship. I began to be able to be intimate with her, to share myself with her in a way that I had not been able to, not unwilling to. She asked me when we were struggling one day, she said, what do you want? What do you want this marriage to look like? And I've been coming to AA, I knew that there was more available. And I said, I want us to be open and honest and transparent. And I'd like you to go first. Because I'm afraid. And you guys have taught me to be willing to go first. The 12 and 12 talks about these relationships. I'm going to talk about two of them. It says that there'll come a time that every sound human being, now this is in the 12th step in the 12 and 12, so it is assuming that perhaps I'm now sound. If you go all the way back, as Leslie talked with us about the sex inventory, I'm encouraged to ask God to help me form a sane and sound ideal for my future sex life, relationship life, whatever that's going to be. Now I'm back in the 12th step, and it says there'll come a time that every sound human being will want to have the deepest possible union in the areas of physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. Now, I was probably 15, 20 years sober before I really saw that and realized that I had never consciously, intentionally given thought to the spiritual, mental, and emotional aspects of my relationship with Connie. And these are conversations that we didn't have, or that I certainly didn't have. And all of a sudden I saw, oh, that's an intimate relationship. When I'm going to lay those things on the line, let's talk about. And I will say that a couple of pages over, and there are some single alcoholics here, I'm sure, or even, actually, you don't have to be single for this to apply. When boy meets girl on AA campus, problems arise. But it's funny to me that it says they will want to be well enough established. And I think that, I don't know whether that means in their recovery or with each other in their relationship, that in the areas of spiritual, mental, and emotional, they are compatible and it's not wishful thinking. Now, it's not lost on me that it doesn't say physical in that one, because Bill's wise enough to presume you already took care of that, right? That's what was the attraction. Now you're jumping into this, but these other three things are good. And I'll just say, let's get together physically and we'll work this other stuff out, because I'm so drawn to this energy. But it says that you're well enough established, that you are compatible, and it's not wishful thinking. Now, compatible, I love that word in terms of relationship. Because when I'm talking about compatibility, it doesn't make one person wrong and one person right. It just means, are we compatible? And by the way, this extends to work relationships. This extends to friendship relationships. And compatibility doesn't mean, to me, in lockstep. It means, can we respect the differences enough? Are we okay with the things that are different, that we're compatible? There are a number of people here, again, who know Connie. Connie and I, well, we're more alike than we've ever been. But we're quite different in many ways. But not in ways, but that doesn't make us incompatible. We found comfort in the differences. And we nurture those in each other. Early in an immature relationship, if one partner has fun when the other partner isn't around, it's somehow disloyal to the relationship. If you have fun without me, how could you dare? And then we'll throw little guilt barbs at people, right? When they're going to go do something. No, it's fine. Go do it. Just when they're headed out the door. I used to call it that screen door. When the screen door closed and pop back open a little and then close. I'll stay here with the kids. No, have fun. I'll be here. I'd use it now, but my wife's retired. I said, what are you going to be doing today? We'll talk for a few minutes. She says, how about you? I said, well, I'm going to work, honey. How about a relationship with God? Which, by the way, I'm talking about it last, but it's the relationship that informs every other relationship. Every relationship I have is through the lens of that relationship. So when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't know, I didn't believe anything. I wasn't anti anything or pro anything. I didn't have, our 12 and 12 uses the phrase, no anchorage to any set of permanent values. I was rudderless. I didn't give much thought to it one way or the other. I went to church when I was a kid. I'm not a recovering Catholic. Hell, we were Methodist. There's nothing easier to be than Methodist. I think heaven must be full of Methodists. You can do anything and be one. And I enjoyed going. I didn't like church that much, but I didn't mind it. And the Bible stories were fascinating to me, right, as a kid. That Jonah in the whale, and Daniel in the lion's den, and Jack in the beanstalk, and see, I didn't know any difference in those stories. I didn't have an experience. Nothing bad happened. I just didn't have any type of experience. But somehow I got uncomfortable with the language. So I get to AA, and when we would get up and hold hands at the end of the meeting, I would not hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer. I wouldn't use the word God for the first 2 or 3 years I was sober. In my big book, I took a marker and blacked out everywhere it said spiritual experience or spiritual awakening, because the language made me so uncomfortable. Guy came up one night after I wouldn't hold hands and was stepping back. By the way, again, you guys said that was perfectly okay. Nobody was pressuring me, but a guy came up to me that I knew. He had heard my treatment fifth step or confessional, and he said, "Steve, what's stopping you there?" And I said, and I was earnest. I said, "I don't want to be a hypocrite." And I said, "I don't know what I believe, and I'm not just going to hold hands and sing songs, with the rest of the campers." And so he had heard me talk about those DUIs. He had heard me talk about a head-on car crash going the wrong way down the interstate that hospitalized people. He heard me talk about being drunk at the hospital when my daughter was born. He'd heard about infidelities in my marriage. He had heard about me stealing time and money from a family business. He said, "But hypocrisy, that's where you draw the line, huh?" He said, "That's really impressive, man." He said, and he was kind of kidding, but it just allowed me. I kind of see, I just, my mind was shut, and I just will plant my flag in the strangest places, right? And I would spend time telling people what I didn't believe about God. I would hear you say something, and then I would come in later and say, "Well, I don't believe this or that," whatever it was. And guy said, "Steve, really good news." He said, "We don't care what you don't believe." He said, "Because you are free to believe anything or not believe anything you don't want to believe in AA. It's okay. There's room." I didn't believe that, but I've come to see it for the truth. When we talk about being able to find my own conception of God, you really mean it. And I know that because I'm here this much longer, and what I talked about earlier when I said that each of us in our own language and from our own point of view talks about how we established a relationship with God. The truth is, in AA, I believe at our best, we don't spend too much time telling people about God. We spend time telling people about how to establish a relationship. And then I get to have my own relationship. If I ask one of you guys how to get from here to Knoxville, and you said, "Oh, Steve, when you get to Knoxville, these are the restaurants you want to go to. Here's where you want to go hear music. You want to avoid the University of Tennessee at all costs, if possible." And I'm going, whoa. You're telling me what to do in Knoxville. I want to know how to get there. Give me directions on how to get there, and then let me experience Knoxville for myself. And that's what you do with this higher power. These 12 steps are the pathway to the power. And then I get to have my relationship with God. When I spent all that time telling people what I didn't believe, I was introduced to a story that many of you have heard me share, but it's been so instructive and helpful to me. It was about the blind man and the elephant. And it said, there were 3 men from Hindustan to learning much inclined. They went to see an elephant, but all of them were blind. It said one of them grabbed the elephant by its tail. And one of them grabbed the elephant around its big leg. And the third one grabbed the elephant by its trunk. And they went back to their village, and the villagers said, "Tell us about an elephant. Tell us about the elephant." And the one who grabbed the elephant by its tail said it's like a rope. And the one who grabbed it around its big leg said it's like the trunk of a tree. And the one who grabbed it by its trunk said it's like a snake. And they argued endlessly about what an elephant was. never understanding that the elephant was big enough to incorporate all those traits. And they weren't describing the elephant, they were describing their relationship to the elephant. They were describing their touch point, their experience with the elephant. So that has helped me be free, not only to have my experience, but to let you have yours. And know when we're talking about it, it may sound differently. But it doesn't make either of us wrong or either of us all right. Cliff talked about it earlier today, that no one can fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. That's really good news to me. This collective group, nobody in here has the whole story, which is comforting to me. So my relationship to this power. And here's what that relationship looks like today. And again, this is my version of touching the elephant. It doesn't challenge anybody else's point of view. I don't conceive of that power and interact with it in a way that presumes that God is doing anything to me or for me. I don't take the position that pieces are being moved around on the chessboard. I think what I'm trying to do is connect to a power and then let the power do what the power does. And what happens is it changes my experience. It changes my experience with each of you. It changes my experience of the world. At a few years sober, when the movie Avatar came out, I don't know how long ago that is now, 15, 18, 20 years. My wife and daughter talked me into going. We're at the IMAX theater, right? You're going, and this was the reintroduction of 3D glasses. And I'm so old that I'd had those old cardboard ones at the drive-in, right? And I'm not going to tell you the title of the movie I was seeing at the drive-in, but now we're in IMAX and we got these the technology had just, come light years. And I was fascinated by it. So I'm watching the movie and I watch for a few minutes and then I take the glasses off and watch for a few minutes. And when I took the glasses off, it would become two-dimensional, right? And fuzzy, just like you guys are now with I couldn't pick you out of a lineup. But you're the same. When I put the glasses on, I see things I could not see. In that movie, the dialogue didn't change, the plot didn't change, the actors didn't change. Nothing in that movie changed but my experience of it. When I put the glasses on, it was a richer experience. I could see things I couldn't see without the glasses. It became three-dimensional. It added depth to what was height and width. And I think when I'm connected to that power, at any given moment, it changes my experience of you. Our book talks about a fourth dimension and a vital sixth sense. So we are living in this three-dimensional world of height and depth and width. But I believe that fourth dimension for me is the spiritual dimension. And when I'm connected, you look a little different. I look different. I feel different. I'm having a different experience. That vital sixth sense is added. I believe the sixth sense is the intuitive thought. That's the presence of the divine spark internally. That's that guidance that other people have talked about. I heard God. Well, when you get the bondage of self from that third step, when I'm being held hostage by those defects of character that John talked about, when greed, lust, envy, pride, sloth, when those things are holding me hostage, I can't hear, I don't have the experience with you. When I have that freedom, which is often momentary, my connection to this power is like that bad lamp in your house, right? That just blinks off and on. It's got a connection is kind of weak. And I get disconnected. Our book says what will block me off from this power is pomp, worship of other things, and calamity. When pomp is a reemergence of pride and ego. When pride and ego raise their ugly heads, and I often don't know it, it's subtle. All of a sudden, I'm operating without God. When worship of other things, which is even more subtle for me, I will raise something up to the highest power. It might be a noble cause. It might be concern for my daughter, might be something with Connie, might be a business deal, it might be money, but all of a sudden it has become the preeminent thing. That means God is down here and now blocked off. Now, God is not, my view is that God didn't go anywhere. Don Pritt said one day, he said, God is ready the moment you are. I don't get put in purgatory when I make a mistake and have to act nice for 6 months to earn back my way back in. The moment I'm surrendered, I'm back in. The light is back on. The connection is there. And I need that because my light goes on and off. My glasses go on and off several times a day. And I'm just trying to keep them on a little bit longer and trying to dial the prescription in a little bit more. We've got a friend, many of you know my friend Mike A. in Nashville. And when Connie and I moved back to Nashville from Richmond 27 years ago now, we bought our house, and in the back was we had a little backyard, and I had this vision of creating a little courtyard back there. I mean, like 20 by 20, not big. And we built this fence around it to enclose that. And there were trees that went around that, and it was just gorgeous. And Mike had a sod farm at the time. And Mike came and put in some beautiful, lush green grass to create that courtyard. And about 2 weeks later, it's just dirt brown. And I called Mike complaining about it, you know. I said it's not the first time I'd call Mike complaining about his grass, but Mike came over and we went out there, and he's looking around, you know, and he said, Steve, he said, the sun can't get through those trees. And which is what I thought was going to make this so beautiful. He said, the sun can't get through those trees, and if you want this grass to grow, you're going to have to trim those trees. And what I would say, what we've been talking about all weekend, is trimming the spiritual trees. Once those trees were trimmed, the sun comes in. It doesn't decide who to shine on. The rain doesn't decide who to get wet. My job is to get in the sun. And to do that through the process of these steps, we are trimming the spiritual trees, allowing that sunlight of the Spirit to just land on me and do what it does. Changes my experience of life. See to it that your relationship with Him is right. And great events will come to pass for you and countless others. Thank you for having me.